It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I am your host for today's show, Devin Little, and I am joined today by my colleagues and two of the very best writers that Red Wings land has to offer, Tony Wolak and Delaney Rimer. I'm going to jump right into it. Tony, how you doing?
I am doing well. It's been a long week, interesting week, but excited to get into it here.
Absolutely. Delaney, how about you? Long time no see. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Long week, lot of stuff to try to figure out what's happening with. So just figuring it out as we go.
Safe to say that we've all caught our breath out over the last 48 hours, right?
Yeah. Ish.
I'll take it.
Last 12 might be better, or last 5.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We have a ton to discuss today, like I said, but before we begin, I got to do an ad read. Our show today is sponsored by the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia, an online database filled with anything and everything hockey. It's like Wikipedia, but without all that unnecessary non-hockey related stuff. So be sure to check that out. But all right, like I said, we have a ton to talk about in case you haven't heard. But it wouldn't be an episode of the Hockey Writers Grindline if we didn't start off with one good, one bad. So to keep things nice and concise, I'm giving you each 30 seconds to share one good, one bad. And Delaney, actually, ladies first here. I'm going to start with you. So real quick, what is your one good, one bad from the week?
One good would have to be, it was an interesting week, maybe not what we wanted, but it was an interesting week. And then one bad would be whatever this storm that's rolling through here is. We've gotten an inch of rain today.
Yeah, I've got snowflakes the size of like my fingernail falling right now, which is kind of crazy. I know that sounds small, but like I have big fingers. Tony, what about you? What is your one good and one bad from the week?
Yeah, real quick. First, the thunder snow that y'all are getting, I think that's just Steve Yzerman imposing as well. I think that's what's going on.
He's got Zeus-like powers.
Yeah, exactly. Good is Alex Nedeljkovic is back here for a redemption story. The bad is, well, that's because Ville Husso's out, and that's bad because he's been good. So
absolutely. Real quick, my good is going to be the Hockey Writers and specifically our producer Matt's coverage of the trade deadline. Been pumping out video after video after video. If you are subscribed to the channel, I know you know it. You've been getting dinged up the wazoo because we're posting recap videos, and I was happy to join him for that Hronek trade recap. And then the bad is that because he's been putting out so many videos, he's a little tired, so we decided to give him the night off. And that means you guys are stuck with me as the host for today. So hopefully I do a decent job. But now that we're past the one good, one bad, let's jump right in, guys. And we're not going to talk about the trade deadline right away because we have some other news we have to talk about. I know this has been a long week, but if you remember all the way back in the beginning of the week, there was a contract signed. No, not that one, the other one. We're going to start our discussion by heading to Wally World, just like the Griswolds. Yes, I am talking about defenseman Jake Walman, who re-signed with the Red Wings on a 3-year deal that carries a $3.4 million cap hit. The kind of throw-in in that Nick Leddy deal has turned out to be quite the player for the Red Wings, so I saw a lot of positive reactions to that contract on social media. But we're here to talk about our opinions on this. So, Tony, you're going to go first this time. What are your thoughts on Jake Walman's new deal?
I was surprised when it was announced the term and the AAV on the contract. To me, at least, screamed great value for the Red Wings. I ran my model while not the news was breaking, when the rumor was coming that he was signing a contract soon, and it gave me a 4-year contract that was somewhere in between 3.15 and 3.75 AAV. So when it was announced that it was 3 years at 3.4 million, I thought that was great value. I mean, compared to the overall market, the Red Wings got a top 4 defenseman for not pennies on the dollar, but let's say dimes on the dollar, because he is, producing, well above what, you'd normally see from someone making $3.4 million a year. The comparables were Matt Roy from the Los Angeles Kings, Matt Grzelcyk from the Boston Bruins, and Nikita Zadorov from the Calgary Flames. They're all kind of similar from a statistical perspective, even if they play different games. I'd say Grzelcyk and Walman are the closest in terms of how they actually play the game. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing to hate about this contract. The Red Wings got a top 4 defenseman for cheap, and that's exactly what you want to see. You mentioned he was a throw-in as part of the Nick Leddy deal. That's actually part of a massive trade treat that I'm going to get into in an upcoming article. So be on the lookout for that.
Nice little plug there. I'm looking forward to reading that. Delaney, over to you now. Like I said, a lot of positive reviews on this deal. Do you agree? Was this a good deal for Steve Yzerman and Jake Walman?
Oh, absolutely. It was a good deal. I think he sees them as part of a core he's building around now that he's had him paired with Seider. They've both really blossomed since then. And we've seen a whole new side of Jake Walman that I don't know if we fully could see before. They're enhancing each other's play really well. And after that game in Ottawa, Jake Walman had himself a night, and he earned that contract almost just in that game is what it seemed like, because I saw people on Twitter going, oh, he needs an extension after this game. Woke up, boom, there it is. He's working. Steve has been working early in the morning on everything this week, it feels like. But yeah, no, I could see him sticking around for a bit longer than that, even if the next 3 years go well. But just giving him that contract right now, right before the trade deadline, when some people were saying, oh, he's a trade chip, we could get something for him, is pretty important, I think, because Steve saw something and decided, let's keep this one and then trade everybody else, but keep him.
Good stuff. Yeah, I like the call out there about people talking about him potentially being a trade chip, because I'll admit it, after the Olimata signing, I know I was like, all right, they're kind of running out of spots on that blue line heading into the future. So maybe he sells high on Walman. And obviously he did not sell high. He secured him. And I think that's a testament to what Walman's done specifically this season. And also Yzerman finding the diamond in the rough, right? Nobody knew who Jake Walman was last year. And if they did, it's because they were a St. Louis Blues fan. Or like they were really into niche prospects. And now here we are now, and Walman's the dude who did the gritty, right? He's made a name for himself for more reasons than one. It's not just because of how he celebrates, but because of what he does on the ice. He's fit like a glove next to Seider. And that was, obviously we know what happened with Seider when he was with Sherratt for the first half of the season. I think you can't overstate how much of an impact Walman has had with Seider. And then the other point I want to make before we move on is that I particularly like the term on the deal, because I know there were a lot of smarter people than I out there calling for an 8-year contract and, give this guy his due and, go max with him. The dude's had one good season this season. Like I said, nobody knew who he was last year. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of giving somebody who broke out this year an 8-year deal. I just couldn't grasp that idea. 3-year deal, I can get behind that. That's not long term. That keeps him in his prime. That gives him plenty of time to show that this season isn't a fluke. It's actually what can be expected moving forward. And if it ends up being like this, just kind of is his lightning in a bottle year, then they're not tied to him super long. You would hate to give somebody an 8-year deal off of one good year, and then they fall off in the first year of that 8-year deal, right? There's Seth Jones is in the first year of his big deal, and already he looks like he is grossly overpaid. So I like this deal a lot for the Red Wings. I like it a lot for Jake Walman. I think he earned his raise. I think he earned this deal. And I think that I'm just looking forward to seeing more celebrations and seeing if he can elevate his game further, because like I said, he's looked phenomenal next to Seider, and Seider's looked phenomenal next to him.
And he's only 27, so it's going to, keep him under contract through the rest of his prime. He'll hit 30, and if he wants to sign elsewhere for more money, that's fine. But like, I agree with what you're saying. An 8-year deal would have put him into his age 35 season. Then I think we're past that. Like the Red Wings have done that quite enough in the past, signing these players to long-term contracts into their mid-30s, and I think we've learned our lessons here, right?
Yeah, no more Ken Holland around to do that.
Well, speaking of 8-year deals that go well into a player's 30s, let's talk about the other deal that you may or may not have heard about that was a bit more notable league-wide than the Jakub Walman contract. Dylan Larkin, everybody breathed a sigh of relief. He finally signed a deal. We don't have to talk about if he's going to get traded. We don't have to talk about what the Red Wings would look like without him, because we don't have to worry about it anymore. He's going to be a Red Wing for the foreseeable future. He signed an 8-year deal with an 8.7 AAV. The captain is locked in. He's not going anywhere. This is the Red Wings top center for the foreseeable future. Put all that speculation to rest, Boston fans. Now I want to start with you, Delaney. Obviously, kind of same thing we did with the Walman contract. What are your thoughts on Dylan Larkin's contract? Do you think it's good value for Larkin? Do you think it's good value for the Red Wings? What you think?
Well, even if it might be a little bit more than a lot of people would be wanting to give him, it wasn't going to be less than that after Horvat's contract. There was no way he was going to be like low 8 millions, below 8.5. It wasn't going to happen after Bo Horvat signed that contract. So it is what it is at that point. It's a win for both sides. It's a win for the team. It's a win for all of us. And it's a win for Larkin. The captain gets to stay. He gets a nice paycheck. And we can all stop having to deal with some of the worst takes I have ever seen in my entire young life. But yeah, no, it's great that he gets to stay, be a hometown kid, hometown captain for pretty much for good at this point. His contract goes into his mid-30s. So yeah, no, definite win for both sides, even if it's a little steeper of a contract. But then I would like to notion that it should have been 8.71, just because who cares about that extra little bit at the end of the day? It makes it his number, so it's okay. I'm not a numbers person. I'm not a cap person. I just think that would be I think that would have been the better choice, but who am I to know?
All righty. Tony, over to you now. The captain is locked in. I know you wrote quite a few articles on the topic. What do you think? Do you think this is a good value deal for the Red Wings and Larkin? And what are your overall thoughts on this contract?
Overall, I think it's a win-win for both the Red Wings and Larkin. We talked about this last week that, without Larkin, the Red Wings are kind of screwed because they have no reasonable alternative. And then, Larkin is the hometown kid who played for the team he loved growing up. And he said multiple times, throughout the negotiation process that he doesn't want to play elsewhere, which he mentioned during his press conference that his agent's like, dude, chill. Like, you're not helping yourself here. But I mean, like, let's be honest, this was going to happen one way or another. The Red Wings and Larkin were going to come to an agreement on a contract. And I think 8.7 million is great value for a first line center. He's not a first line center like Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews, which is fine. He's not getting paid like those two. And what this does is sets the unofficial ceiling for contracts that Yzerman signs in the near future at 8.7 million as that ceiling. So with Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond looking for new deals soon, this is going to be it's good salary cap management from this perspective. I know a lot's been made about how long this dragged out. I honestly think, and this is pure speculation, I have no inside knowledge here, but I think, Larkin hired like one of the best in Pat Brisson and said, just get me a good deal. All right, I want to be here, just get me a good deal. And that's why it took so long, because like, Pat Brisson is one of the best at playing hardball and negotiating. And Yzerman knew that Larkin wanted to stay. So just the stalemate going back and forth about like negotiating over those last couple of dollars to like get him the best deal. And in the end, it worked out for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you've made a lot of good points over your few appearances over the last like month or so, Tony, when it comes to the negotiation and the negotiation process specifically. Pat Brisson specifically is a very busy agent. Like, he doesn't have 3 clients, he's got dozens. And so just, even considering that, like, obviously you can work on more than one thing at a time, but I feel like just in general, this was never going to be a quick process. I even was kind of preparing for this to drag out into the summer, like before free agency, obviously. I was expecting this to go into like Stamkos territory, where it's like 48 hours before he hits free agency. So the fact that this got done this week, sigh of relief for me, because like you said, Delaney, some of the worst takes I've ever seen as well. And I'm getting real beaten down by it. So I'm excited I can move on from that crap. But also I agree. This is good value for both teams. Both, this has been the narrative the whole time. Both sides needed each other. There's no other team where Larkin is the captain. There's no other team that he grew up watching and cheering for, right? And the Red Wings, for that point, there's nobody else that could have been their top line center. Even if they went in free agency, there's nobody of Larkin's caliber. Larkin would have been probably the best center available. And their best options internally were Andrew Kopp and Micah Rasmussen, and they're both great players, but they're not top line centers. So I think this was the inevitable outcome. You can negotiate the term all you want, but this was always going to be the conclusion in my mind. I'm just glad it got done sooner rather than later. And like I said, and honestly, I'll even put this little spin on it. As a Michigan kid myself, who, obviously grew up watching the Red Wings my entire life, it's very exciting to me to see the Michigan kid be the first Michigan born captain, but also to now, commit long term again to this team. I think there's a lot of people in my shoes, a lot of Michigan kids, a lot of Michigan whatever hockey fans that see themselves in Dylan Larkin and are very excited at a future where he hoists the cup as the captain of the Detroit Red Wings. There is nobody else that, when all is said and done, when they do get to that point, Larkin will have been through everything with that team. And I'm looking forward to that for him personally. So I'm glad that still got done. I'm glad that it rewards him for what he's done. And I'm glad that it doesn't hamstring the Red Wings, because they're going to be able to build a really good team around him at given the number he's signed in at. All right. Now, you know how we do this. We got to slip into our off the rush. We got some quick questions here. Delaney and Tony have no idea what I'm going to ask them, but don't worry. They're going to be softies. I'm not going to hit you too hard. Tony, I'm going to start with you on this one. What will Jake Walman's career best season be in terms of goals and points?
10 goals, 26 assists, 36 points, if my math adds up.
It's a very Filip Hronek-esque season. I like it. Delaney, over to you. What do you think Jake Walman's career best season will be?
He has more goals than assists this year. I'm just looking at that now. That's not what I was expecting to see there. So I'm going to go, I'll give him 12 goals and 20 assists for 32 total.
32.
Not 30 assists. That was way too generous. My brain not being able to do math.
Hey, if he spends enough time alongside Sider, I wouldn't write it off.
Maybe.
I will go 8 goals and 38 points. I'll give him that 30 assists. Like I said, looking forward to seeing what he can do alongside Sider moving forward. All right, next question, Delaney. I'm starting with you on this one. Will Gary Bettman hand Dylan Larkin the Stanley Cup during Larkin's new deal?
He better.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
Tony. Tony, will Gary Bettman hand Dylan Larkin the Stanley Cup during Larkin's new deal?
No, Batman's got to retire at some point.
Oh, loophole.
Two
I
ways
see
to
you.
not answer the question, but answer.
Fine. Well, Bill Daly hand him. I will say that Larkin will hoist the cup, and I think it will be towards the end of his contract. I do want to say that. Like I'm thinking maybe even year 7, year 8, but I do think it happens. It's trusting the Yzer plan, right?
Yep.
All right, good stuff. We made it out of one rush. Now let's take a quick timeout to pay some bills because we have a lot to talk about in the second half. This is a reminder that today's show is brought to you by the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia, an online database of anything and everything hockey. Do you want to know which team drafted 6th overall in 2018? What about the team that drafted 6th overall in 2019? And then what about the team that drafted 6th overall in 2021? Spoiler alert, it's all the same team, and that team has some rotten lottery luck. Boy, I wonder what team I'm talking about. Anyways, find out the answer to that and more over at the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia. All right, now that I've gotten my joke about picking 6th out, let's talk about the meat of the show. Let's talk about what everybody's talking about right now. Of course, we're talking about the trade deadline and the deadline deals that Steve Yzerman made. And boy, did he make some big ones. Tony, we're going to start with you on this one. I want just kind of your overall thoughts. We're going to go general to start. Overall thoughts on the Red Wings trade 2023 trade deadline moves. What do you think? Do you think that they, fared well? Do you think that maybe they could have made some more moves, less moves? Where are you at on the Red Wings trade deadline?
I'm not sure if you guys saw what I was drinking, but it's a Kona Big Wave because the Red Wings made a splash today.
Oh,
I got some dad jokes. Don't worry.
Here's to that.
All right. I think overall it was a good day or good week, if you will. The main qualm I have is the Jakub Vrana trade, but we can get to that more in a little bit. But the fact that the Red Wings got a first-round pick for both Tyler Bertuzzi and Filip Hronek, it's great for the rebuild, obviously, and it's something that gives Steve Yzerman flexibility moving forward. He can either use those picks, or he can use them to trade up or back in the draft to get the players that he wants, or that Chris Draper wants, for that matter. So I think there's a lot to like about what happened, and I think compared to recent years, the Red Wings just haven't made a big splash at the trade deadline. There just weren't the trade chips to garner first-round picks or quality prospects, but they made the right moves this year by moving Bertuzzi, who wasn't going to re-sign, for a contract that fit the Red Wings game plan, and selling high on Hronek after not doing that with Bertuzzi last year. So overall, it was great.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Delaney, over to you. I just want some general thoughts on the Red Wings 2023 trade deadline.
Well, I was a little bit surprised with how much was sold. I figured that some things would be sold, but little more was done that I thought was going to happen. Some things I thought would be more of an off-season issue instead of a right now issue. But alas, they were a right now issue. I was thinking they would maybe bring someone in. That didn't happen. We're just kind of stockpiling those draft picks, hoarding them, if you will. And I'm realizing the rebuild has a little bit longer to go than we all thought. Shelling out some of these pieces made us realize, oh, shoot, we don't have that foundation we thought we had now. So, and we have the picks. It's like 28 picks over the next 3 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the number. So it's coming.
Tony, I want to ask you something about what Delaney just said and how the rebuild maybe isn't where we thought it was. I've seen a lot of stuff personally about how trading Bertuzzi and Hronek specifically means that Yzerman's basically hitting the reset button on the rebuild. I'm curious what you think on that idea. Do you think that trading those two players specifically means that they've reset the rebuild?
There's a common joke around the Wolak household here, and if the Red Wings aren't playing too well, my wife will be like, "What's going on with them? Like they did well, the game before, whatever." I'm like, they're rebuilding. It's going to take time. And her common response back is like, "Tony, they've been rebuilding for like 10 years now. Like enough's enough." But I don't think it hits the reset button. Look at the two players who Yzerman dealt. That I guess he dealt more, obviously, but look at Bertuzzi and Hronek. Bertuzzi was 28. He's not a spring chicken just out of juniors anymore. And like saying that as a 32-year-old makes me feel super old, but he was a pending unrestricted free agent. He was on the backside of his prime. Anything long-term is not going to age well whatsoever for a player who he makes his career around the net and in the dirty areas, and is not the best skater in the world. So yeah, he's looking for a big contract, and Yzerman wasn't going to give it to him. So it makes sense to trade him. He's not hitting the reset. That's good asset management right there. You don't want any general manager to do that. And then for Hronek, he's selling high on him. He's having a great season, like getting a first round pick and a second round pick for a second pairing defenseman. Like that's awesome. I mean, the Red Wings have a gaping hole on the right side of their defense now, but still he got a good value at a time when it was available. If he held out until next year or the year after, it may not have been there. So it's not hitting the reset button because you have Larkin, you have Raymond, you have Seider, you have Edvinsson, Kosa, Marco Kasper. You have all these great players and prospects who are there. You're building something. You're almost there. We saw the team this season. They are almost there. And if you're getting rid of a player who wasn't going to get back or wasn't going to come back, and then, a second pairing defenseman, you're not hitting the reset button. You're just, pushing it out a little further. That's it.
Delaney, over to you now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, speaking about Hronek here, I'm pretty sure I saw you tweet that you were definitely surprised by the Red Wings being able to get a first round pick out of Filip Hronek. I know when I did that recap thing with Matt, I know I said that I feel like that was a situation where Vancouver presented a too good to pass up offer, and so they kind of had to pull the trigger because you're getting a first for Hronek. Do it. Are you kind of in that boat? Were you like, is it kind of sad to see him go, but that you couldn't say no to that deal?
Oh, for sure. Like I had tweeted something along the lines of, if you would have told me a year ago that we'd be getting a first round pick for Filip Hronek, I would have burst out laughing because I would have. He was not this player last year. He was nowhere close to being this caliber of player. I think I wanted him traded at least 20 times a week is what it was starting to feel like, because he would step on the ice, turn the puck over, completely whiff a defensive play. And I'm like, why is he still here? And then all of a sudden he grew a handlebar mustache this year, was magic for a little bit, shaved the mustache, pretty mediocre after that. And maybe the Canucks were a little too generous with their offer. Maybe they got a little excited is what it might feel like. He's having a good year, but don't know if everything else backs up the first round pick, but you can't say no to that. If Steve made the decision he was going to sell at the deadline, and he got that offer, and he's like, well, okay, gotta full throttle, just go with it at this point, because you're not going to get that offer over the summer. Like I figured he was one of the players that I thought, if anything, he would be moved over the summer or during the off season, but alas, it was too good to pass up, like you were saying, 100%, because I don't know if you'd be finding a bunch of teams that would be willing to cough up a first and second round pick for him in like a month or 3 months or however long. But in the fact that his was only pretty much one pick different than the Chychrun trade does make me laugh a little bit, because that has had so much steam and so much hype behind it for months. And Filip Hronek almost got the same package.
That's
What do you know?
That's some top tier Yzermaning, let me tell you.
Oh, it really is.
I know for me, like, you talk about make me an offer I can't refuse. That offer is an offer I can't refuse. I'm a big Hronek fan. I actually think he gets a little undersold because the dude can put up points. Like, plain and simple. There's not many defensemen in the league that can produce points like he can. And I think that's the reason why Vancouver was willing to actually put the first out there. But when you put the first out there, I can move on from Filip Hronek. So I know for me, I like the deal, and I really like that player, but I can move on at that price. Now, speaking of Hronek, he's a Czech player, right? And one of his best friends, in fact, one of his best friends on the team, in fact, this player said that he and Hronek were like basically the same person in an interview. I'm talking about Jakub Vrana. And Tony, I'm coming over to you again on this one. I know that you kind of hinted that you have more you want to say on Vrana. What are your thoughts on the deal that sent him to St. Louis? The Red Wings basically get a bucket of peanuts and a 7th round pick for him. And, obviously there's a whole lot of stuff that goes with it that we may never know. But I don't know. What are your overall thoughts on the deal and just the kind of overall situation?
You're right that we'll probably never know what exactly went down with Vrana and the Red Wings and how that fell apart. When Yzerman was asked about that whole situation during his trade deadline press conference, he declined to go into further detail and elaborate on it, and he just basically said that the two parties were ready to move on, and he wishes him the best in St. Louis, and that's all he would say. Which if it's a personal matter, then that's exactly what you'd want Yzerman to say. But when you look at the overall history here, Vrana was part of a trade that brought Anthony Mantha to Washington D.C. to play for the Capitals, and Mantha had been a key player on the Red Wings before that. And then flash forward a couple years, and he gets flipped for a 7th round pick and an AHL forward who was subsequently loaned back to St. Louis's farm team. It's just essentially a paper move to move the contract over to the Red Wings, but that's really it. And have Vrana's salary retained at 50% for this season and next season. You have to wonder why things ended up this way, and not necessarily from Vrana's perspective, but also from the Red Wings perspective as well. Like, if they had decided that enough was enough with him for whatever reason, and they're ready to move on, why not showcase him in a meaningful top 6 role to show he still has it and that he can score and that he's a valuable asset to a team, instead of playing him maybe 10 minutes a game on the 4th line where he's expected to be a forechecker. That's not how he plays the game. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And there's probably a lot that's going on behind the scenes that would make it make sense, but we're never going to know that. But just because a player fell out of favor with the team doesn't excuse that team, a rebuilding team, from prioritizing effective asset management. And this was poor asset management. It was. And again, there's probably more details behind the scenes that we're never going to know that plays into it. But at least from the outside looking in, it was poor asset management. The Red Wings could have done more to pump up his value, even after waiving him, to get more out of a trade if they wanted to move on. They could have held on to him for the rest of the year and traded him in the offseason. They could have, not, if they did that, then they could have potentially taken part in another trade today or this week where they retained salary, because Vrana took up the 3rd and final slot for this year.
Yep.
Now, I do want to add that there is a human element involved here. And as Yzerman said, both Vrana and the Red Wings were looking to part ways. And if Vrana just really needed to get out of Detroit for whatever reason, Yzerman did right by him, and that's a good thing that he kind of looked at it from the human perspective. So it's an unfortunate situation that it's going to be a mystery moving forward, but you have to wonder about what could have been.
Absolutely. I especially like your point there about poor asset management, because it's almost like as great of asset management as they did with Hronek selling high, right? They sold incredibly like bottom low on Vrana, like to the point where like there has to be like so much more to the story, because like you said, why wouldn't you put him in a top 6 role to show he still has it? Why wouldn't you just keep him past the deadline? He still had another year on it. He still has another year in his contract. Why wouldn't you, let him show his stuff going into next season, and then you work out a deal? It leads me to believe that like a fresh start was like sorely needed for him. And maybe it is kind of a situation where like, like you said, he needed to get out of Detroit. And so at that point, you're kind of handcuffed. You can't ask for, fair value for him when you just need to get him out. So I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and if I could jump in with one more thing. Yzerman had a similar situation when he was the general manager of Tampa Bay, when Jonathan Drouin requested a trade early on in his tenure there, and it got handled completely differently. And like the circumstances, at least from our perspective, could be completely different for all we know. But Drouin requested a trade, and Yzerman said, "Okay, cool, I'm not going to do it. Like I'll wait this one out." Because he didn't have any leverage, and neither did Vrana in this case. And he eventually traded him for Mikhail Sergachev a couple of years later, selling high on him after a good 53-point season. So it makes you wonder, like, what happened? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Where you sold him, traded him for nothing, essentially, in a similar situation, Yzerman dealt Drouin for essentially a top pairing defenseman. So guess we'll never know.
Delaney, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity to talk about this specific topic. What are your thoughts on the Vrana situation? Because it's more than just a trade at this point. It's a whole thing. So what are your thoughts on it?
I feel bad being too opinionated either way, because this has such a human element to it that most trades in most of these situations don't have. Like, I genuinely just want what's best for him, and it seems like a change of scenery was needed, like desperately needed at this point, because anyone could have picked him up off of waivers earlier in the year. Wouldn't have gotten anything back. Nothing. We barely got something back. Some random AHL guy who I had to look up this morning because I was just getting out of bed and was very confused.
And they didn't even assign him to the Griffins either. Like,
no, like, who is he? I didn't know. And I'm like, are you related to Sarah McLachlan? Are we famous? No, just some random Springfield Thunderbirds, I think it was. Yeah.
Yep.
No, not AKA some random guy at a 7th round pick, or as you said, just like a bag of chips and a Coke. But yeah, it sucks, but I'll lighten that by saying I guess Steve Yzerman was just checking out at the trade deadline this year by trading him and Hronek. I came up with that a couple minutes ago, and I was hoping I could.
You think you're the only one with dad jokes, Tony? It turns out Delaney's got them too.
I'm here for it.
All right.
Thank you.
Wait, see, that's how you change the mood around here. We're getting sad, we're getting a little disappointed, and then Delaney pulls out a dad joke. See, they're good for something, people.
Oh yeah, they're useful.
Now we still have 2 other moves we have to talk about at least a little bit. And Delaney, I'm going to start with you on this one because I know that you're kind of a closet Bruins fan. And the Bruins added a player that a lot of fans here in Detroit adore. they added Tyler Bertuzzi, in case you haven't heard. And they got him for a first and a fourth round pick. That first is in next year's draft. What are your thoughts on this? Do you like that fit for Bertuzzi? Do you think that the Bruins are now like hands down the best team in the world right now? What do you think of this deal?
I personally think I really enjoy it, but I'm aware I'm the minority of Red Wings fans saying that, but it's a good gritty team. He deserves to be alongside other players that can match his level of grit. Sorry, Detroit does not really have that at the moment. He was kind of carrying that one on his shoulders since we lost our other gritty guy, which was Giovanni Smith earlier this year, and he was hardly ever there in the first place. But I'm really excited to see how it goes for them. They're an absolute wagon this year. The Bruins are. They are pretty much plowing into the playoffs, hot as can be. They're going to make a run, and seeing Bertuzzi get a cup run is something that every single Red Wings fan should be happy about, regardless if they hate the Bruins or not. Because after all, he was our guy. He was on the team for 8 years or something like that. So wanting success for him should outweigh any kind of grudge against the team that he's playing for, in my opinion, at least. I'm really excited to see it. And I was joking around with my roommate who's a Bruins fan, and I'm like, I need to see in a Behind the B episode, I need to see him and Brad trying to become friends after all these years of them just sparring at each other like children. I need to see some documentation of that process. Is it going to be like introducing two cats to each other for the first time, or how's it going to go? I just need to see it, but I'm excited, and hopefully I can catch him in some games at TD Garden in the fall, because I'm going to Boston. I'm chasing after him. So it's a pro for me. I still get to see him play all the time, hopefully. Yeah. Who knows what they're going to do with him once Taylor Hall comes back. But for the time being, it's very exciting seeing any guy on this team get to run for a cup on such a legitimate contender of a team.
And with that, I want to put my 2 cents in right there. And it's two things. One, Bertuzzi has always, in my mind, played the type of game that is tailor-made for the playoffs. So to see him not just go to a playoff team, but go to like the top team in the league right now that is expected to go on a deep run, I think that some eyes are going to open up to how good of a player Tyler Bertuzzi is. I think he's going to be huge for that Bruins team. I think that he's going to make a lot of Bruins fans fall in love with him. And I think he's probably going to make a lot of hockey fans fall in love with him too, because he plays that type of game. He plays that selfless game. He's literally given up both of his hands this season for the Red Wings. He's going to do the exact same thing, or at least try to do the same thing for the Bruins. I'm happy for him because, like you said, he's going to a really darn good team, and hopefully that translates to a long playoff run for him. And then the other thing, I make no mystery of the fact that I'm very proud that I'm from Grand Rapids. I watch the Griffins all the time. That's my hometown team. Tyler Bertuzzi was the playoff MVP the year that the Griffins won the Calder Cup in 2017. I was there. I watched that game. I watched Tyler Bertuzzi, hoist the MVP trophy. Watched him hoist the Calder Cup. So I personally, on a personal note, will always be cheering for him, and I really, really hope. I'm just gonna say it. I'm cheering for the Bruins now. I didn't want to cheer for the Bruins because they're the President's Trophy team. Why would you cheer for them? But Tyler Bertuzzi's on that team now. I hope Bertuzzi wins the Stanley Cup because what he did for my hometown team, I hope he gets his name in the Stanley Cup. Now, Tony, of course, I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk about this. Bertuzzi's been a very key part of this team for a long time. What are your thoughts on the Tyler Bertuzzi deal?
Well, when you said he gave up both of his hands for the Red Wings, it made me think, wow, I'm glad Zdeno Chara isn't on the Bruins anymore with 100.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, Bertuzzi playing on the third line with Taylor Hall. Goodness, that team's a juggernaut. And I think my personal opinion is the Rangers and the Bruins are on a collision course for the Eastern Conference Final. and it's going to be a must-watch hockey. So, good for Bertuzzi for going to a team like that. I agree with the overall sentiment here that a first round pick and a fourth round pick was a great value, for Bertuzzi. Keep in mind the Red Wings have played over half their games this season without him. So while he's going to be missed, it's not like this is uncharted territory. I mean, I know we talked about Giovanni Smith being gone, but we can't forget about Adam Ernie and his grittiness. What I think is going to happen is I have a prediction. So my theory is that Bertuzzi and his agent, mostly his agent, wanted a long-term contract, in the upper 5s or 6 million range, which is fair. This is like the biggest contracts he's going to sign. And hockey players, I said this before, hockey players have, 10, 15 years to earn 90 or 95% of their lifetime income. Go get your money. Like, I'm all for it. I don't think the market's going to be there for that kind of contract. I don't. And, unless he has a crazy good playoff run and, produces extremely well in the third line for the Bruins, I don't think the market's going to be there for a 6x6 contract that he probably could have got if he signed after last season. So my theory is that the market's cool on him and the Red Wings circle back with like a 3 or 4 year deal, $5.75 million. And I think he seriously considers it because he enjoyed playing in Detroit. He has great chemistry and great friendship with Dylan Larkin. And I wouldn't put I wouldn't say that his time in Detroit's over. It's over for now, but I don't know if it's it forever. And, for the Red Wings, he'll, if this happens, if this comes to fruition, he'll slide back into the first line again. And if it doesn't, and it's my theories, it's washed. I'd love to see Michael Rasmussen in that role. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If him and his kneecap come back as good as they were, man.
I don't know if you guys, but like when it comes to like a Moose, they're indestructible. So I so I have a feeling that he's the exact same way.
I do want to, I'm glad you say that because I'm just going to throw this out there real quick. I feel like, it's not a coincidence that Rasmussen went down in that game against Tampa Bay and things completely fell apart afterwards. Like, obviously Rasmussen's getting a lot of love recently. He's elevated his game the way that everybody hoped he would, and he's become a key part of this team. But I don't think even saying that fully captures how key he is to this team. And I actually fully agree that he could step into that Bertuzzi role. Especially now that it seems like Lalonde's more willing to use him on the wing. So obviously Bertuzzi's a wing, but yeah, I think that this team's really gonna miss Rasmussen down the stretch here. They're missing his size, they're missing his hard work, they're missing everything that he brings to the table. But speaking of somebody who's big and does a lot of hard work and is very likable, we have to talk about the last player that the Red Wings dealt, and that's Oskar Sundqvist. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this because, well, I'm running out of steam. I don't know if you guys are, but and also this was kind of just a minor deal. They traded him to the Minnesota Wild for a 4th round pick. I'm sure David Perron is devastated. That's his best. That was his best friend on the team. Spent years together in St. Louis. But I know I'm a little sad to see Sonny go. I'm going to miss his smile on that bench. Tony, do you have any thoughts you want to share on the Sundqvist deal?
I mean, it's good value again for a player who isn't going to come back. 4th round pick kind of makes up for the 4th that was dealt in the Hronek deal. But I personally thought it was kind of funny that within 2 minutes of the Sundqvist deal being leaked, there was another leak that the Red Wings were going after James Van Riemsdyk. And that was the only topic that was discussed on Twitter. And Sundqvist is probably sitting there like, guys, what about me? Like, I don't know what I'm being traded for yet. But
for real.
I enjoyed having Sundqvist on the Red Wings. I thought he brought a good mix of physicality and a little bit of offensive creativity to the bottom six. But it's obviously sad to see players go at this time of year, but he's going to a playoff bound team in Minnesota. He's going to walk into the locker room and they're going to play Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, and he's going to be, his smiley self. So there you go.
Good call. Good call. I do want to throw out there real quick too, also that I'm actually a little surprised that they dealt him. I know he's a pending UFA and he's like the prototypical guy that gets dealt at the trade deadline. But from what I've heard, he really brought some life to the locker room. Obviously, there's all those former Blues players there that he fit in with and knew and whatnot. He's a right-handed shot, has good size, was part of that Redwoods line in the beginning of the season. I thought there was enough things going for him that I thought they might re-sign him on like a 2-year short-term deal. So I mind you, I didn't think he wasn't going to get traded, but like I still was a little surprised because I thought there definitely was an opportunity for him to re-sign in Detroit. So like I said, a little sad to see him go, but I get it. I completely get it. Delaney, do you have any thoughts on the Sundqvist trade? Were you as surprised or / not surprised as I was?
Yeah, no, I was pretty much feeling the same way as you. I saw that pop up, got distracted by us and the ghost of James Van Riemsdyk, which was very confusing. Was still not too sure about all that, but hey, great career in Detroit, flawless, Did nothing wrong, did nothing right, was just there to the rafters. But yeah, no, I'm sad to see Sonny go. It's kind of funny because out of the package that we got back for Nick Leddy, Jake Walman ended up being the one that stuck. Don't know if any of us could have really predicted that being the case. Like, oh, we're getting Oskar Sundqvist and this guy. And little did we know, this guy would end up being one of our top defensemen behind Mo Seider. And Sundqvist, he was great for the team, great for the locker room. I hate how many best friend pairings we split up at the trade deadline this year. Steve really had it out for everybody on a personal level, it seemed. But hey, good thing is they're able to see each other eventually. Bertuzzi might be back one day. Hopefully he'll come back as the Stanley Cup champion if he comes back. Knock on wood. But yeah, no, that one was surprising to me. I had that jotted down as like maybe a little bit more of a return would have been nice. I get the return he got, but maybe something like it felt just a little lackluster. It got so swept under the rug by a trade that didn't even happen. Was it really that uneventful that we were all focused on a trade that didn't happen? But yeah, I feel like a little something more could have been warranted. And that was another one, maybe off-season move, keep him around a bit longer. Didn't think he was going to go this week, but hey, right before the deadline too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I was thinking maybe like a third. Like I wasn't shooting for the stars, but like a fourth did seem a little under what I expected.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we made it to almost the end, but I have to hit you guys with a couple more off the rush opportunities here. So, Delaney, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who are you most glad the Red Wings did not trade?
Well, I would say Jake Walman, but we extended him like right at the start of the week. So I guess that spoiled that answer for me. So either him or Dylan Larkin would have been my two answers, but they both got signed to extensions pretty early in the week. Ooh, who's left? Other than that? I was kind of rooting for Bertuzzi to stay a little bit longer, but that didn't pan out either. Oh boy. I don't know. I guess Larkin and Walman would be my guess. I know Seider wasn't going anywhere. I knew Raymond wasn't going anywhere. Husso wasn't going anywhere. Just, yeah, no. I'll stick with Walman.
I'll take it. I'll accept it. Tony, over to you. Who are you most glad the Red Wings did not trade?
Larkin. I was when he signed his contract extension, I was equally as happy, for the Red Wings that they got this done, that he's sticking around, as I was that we would be just done with these like ridiculous Larkin trade proposals. Like, all right, we're done. He's staying. Okay. Thanks.
I don't remember where it's from, but I saw one like a month or so ago, and it was literally Larkin for a second round pick. And it was a Maple Leafs thing because of course it was. But it was Larkin for a second. That's it. And that was a serious proposal. And at that point I knew I was done with it. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm gonna throw out a different name though, and maybe this is a bit controversial, and I'm sure somebody in the comments is gonna tell me I'm an idiot, but bring it on. I'm glad they didn't trade Filip Zadina, especially after that assist he had on Bergeron's goal last night. I think that there was a very real chance that you could sell Zadina. I also think that that would have been selling very low. But I also think that, especially since he's returned from injury over the last couple weeks, he's looked like the player that everybody kind of hopes he's going to be. I would hate to pull the plug on him too soon. I've been very vocal about how I believe in Filip Zadina. I know, Tony, you're kind of on that bandwagon too.
Oh yeah, we're Team Zadina here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just glad that he's going to have the rest of the season at least to show that what he's doing right now isn't a fluke, and this is more of what we can expect from him. Because even if you're the biggest Zadina naysayer, even you have to admit that he's looked pretty darn good over the last couple of weeks. So hope we see more of that, and I hope that we're not talking about him as a trade candidate next year. All right, Tony, we're going to start on you on the second one, and this is kind of general NHL. Which team won the trade deadline?
Ooh, I will say, man. All right, I'll just go with Boston. Like, you could make the argument for the Rangers as well, but when they traded for Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway earlier, I don't think many predicted that Orlov would be the second coming of Bobby Orr. So I want to say he's had 3 goals and 8 points in 4 games, and I'm just sitting here like, how? Like, nothing is going wrong for the Bruins. This is ridiculous, but I think that they're the winners for the trade deadline.
I'm sure even Alex Ovechkin is watching that going, WTF? Why? We needed that. Delaney, over to you. Which team won the trade deadline?
It's got to be Boston. You can't argue with that. Don Sweeney came out of absolutely nowhere with a masterclass trade deadline performance. Orlov in particular, 8 points in 4 games as a defenseman, as he had 19 points through 43 games the rest of the season. Keep that in mind. He has half of that in 4 games with Boston. He played 43 games for the Capitals this year, 4 with Boston, and he has 8 points in those 4 games. How? Don't know. Great pickup there. And then Bertuzzi, they won. They won the deadline. They did great. Good haul.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of echo what you said, Tony, where like you might be tempted to say the Rangers. I think they kind of I actually give them like negative marks because Patrick Kane basically forced his way over to New York. Like, they didn't really had to work for that. They just had to figure out how to make the money work. It's one thing when you make a Tyler Bertuzzi trade and a Dmitry Orlov and a Garrett Hathaway trade out of nowhere, and like nobody's connecting that dots and forcing it to happen. But when you're Patrick Kane, you go trade me there, and that's all you can do. That you didn't really have to work for that. So I do think the Rangers have a hell of a team, and I'd be scared to play against them. But I'm going to make it unanimous. I think Don Sweeney did what he needed to do. He went all in on this team. This team is never going to be as good as it is right now. The clock is ticking on Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. They've given themselves every opportunity to go on a deep run this year. And adding Tyler Bertuzzi is just like the cherry on top. They didn't need Tyler Bertuzzi, but they got him anyways. And like we've said, that third line theoretically with Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi on it, that's ridiculous. Come on.
The fact Taylor Hall is hurt right now is a bit of a bummer, but hopefully when he comes back, him and Tyler Bertuzzi will be able to chop it up on the third line together in the playoffs for a bit, because hopefully Hall is back for the playoffs. Because I forget what happened, but I know they just put him on IR, I think, the other day. But seeing them play together at some point this season, whether it be in the playoffs or whenever, that would be awesome. I'm excited for that.
It's the playoffs in the East are definitely going to be interesting this year. I mean, if you just focus on the Atlantic in general, you're going to have Tampa Bay and Toronto again matching up in the first round. And if somehow by some miracle Toronto makes it out of the first round, at least they have 9 defensemen to, match up against the high-powered Bruins offense. And, who knows if that'll work out. But I mean, even just the Atlantic is going to be must watch, let alone everything that's going on in the Metropolitan. So watch out.
There's going to be some very, very good teams that are out in the first round, just by virtue of how the playoffs are set up and the fact that there's so many good teams. Crazy, going to be fun to watch. But that concludes our show. I want to thank you, Tony, and you, Delaney, for joining me. Thank you for sticking around through this long one. We had a lot to talk about. I think we touched on just about everything, and we offered some pretty darn good thoughts, if you ask me. Thank you for tuning in. We can't do this without you. I always love to say that. Be sure you're checking out Hockeypedia over at thehockeywriters.com for anything and everything you could possibly ever need to know about hockey. I'm talking Gordie Howe's middle name, maybe. I'm talking Tyler Bertuzzi's draft position. I'm talking who owns the New York Rangers. And I'm even talking the 1980 draft class, just all of it. Just go up and down. It'll tell you who it is. It's everything. It's like those big books you can get, but online. So you don't have to sift through all those pages. Once again, thank you for watching our show. We hope to see you next week. This is Devin signing off.